Hello and welcome to Talking Politics with myself, James Cordwell. So what's in the programme today? Well, it's all things royal and premier. Now, King Charles III held his first state visit this week, in fact, playing host to South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. A full state banquet, a private meeting with the Prime Minister at number 10 and a visit to the Royal Botanical Gardens followed, where Prince Edward and President Ramaphosa toured the gardens in Kew here in London and listened, apparently, to talks about plants. Well, the visit came as Britain and South Africa announced a new health and science partnership covering vaccine manufacturing, genome sequencing, climate change and other areas too. But what goes on behind the scenes? What important events are discussed and what do these state visits mean for the UK and South Africa both? Well, earlier in the state visit, a royal banquet where King Charles and the South African president spoke. Take a look.
It is only by working together across our countries and our generations that we will tackle some of the greatest challenges of our times. For instance, our collaboration in science and innovation is literally vital in order to protect our people's health by preparing for future pandemics. Perhaps, above all, we must find and implement practical solutions to the twin existential threats of climate change and biodiversity loss.
In times of uncertainty and instability, a relationship such as ours is particularly important. We are urged and, in a way, compelled by our common commitment to peace, stability, democracy, and shared prosperity to work together to overcome the difficulties of the present and prepare ourselves for the challenges of the future. We look forward to strengthening the ties between the British people and the people of South Africa through areas such as tourism, sports, arts and culture. Your Majesty, when it comes to sport, I think it is perhaps best that I steer clear away from the upcoming match on Saturday. And even as we seated close to each other, it is best that you and I should steer clear of that and not talk about it.
So the South African president talking about the football going on in Doha, but what else did the two heads of state discuss? Now, joining me on set to discuss these matters is our insider, the man with the inside knowledge, Professor Chris Imafidon. Welcome to the programme, Professor.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation.
Can you tell us your impressions of the pomp and ceremony of a state event and what was discussed between the two heads of state, do you think?
Wow. It's always something that is jovial, something that is comical, something is always lighthearted. But the interesting thing that terribly off the record was the fact that the dietary requirements of the Western nation is slightly different from the African. You see, the African enjoys a lot of carbohydrate. There's a lot of burning of fats and activities. So that informs the way the African feeds. But when you're having either a state banquet or in fact the last banquet we had, which was hosted by the Lord Mayor, it's slightly different. The menu is not that of a familiar African meal. So I think that's the part of it. But it was very lighthearted, a meeting of minds, understanding that we have a new king that is very dedicated to a conviction. This is the difference between politics and monarchy. A conviction-driven monarchy that wants to see change in his time. He wants to see positive change. And he literally expressed his mind freely when it came to that.
It's interesting, really. I quite like Cyril Ramaphosa. At the end of his little speech we saw there, he said, we best not talk about the football. This, Cyril Ramaphosa seems to be a man ready and willing and able to laugh and joke and be smiles all the time. Is that your impression of him?
He doesn't take himself seriously. In fact, you walk past him not knowing that he's the president, if not for the security around him. and he's very down to earth. His modesty, his humility shines through in both informal and formal conversation.
So how did King Charles III perform at his first ever state visit as head of state for the UK?
I don't know whether I'm qualified to score him, but if you compare the previous state visits that were hosted by Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and this, he did excellently well. This is a flying style, considering the fact that, like you said, let's not mention the football, there was a big global event taking place at the same time. So the media coverage that is almost always front cover of all the major newspapers could not happen because of the controversies with football, the fact that it's taking place in winter, and different teams having different ideological positions they wanted to express to undermine the local host. But I think the media tried to get a balance. If I was going to score the media, I would score them 2 out of 10, because the prominence that is required of a state visit was missing.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.